This week on Cosmic Sponge, we launched the Winter Wonders contest of 2021. The Pentagon clarifies the purpose of its new reporting agency. Congress demands a rapid response team for UFOs. The U.S. government floats a plan for fighting ETs with Russian assistance. And then for our main topic, we look at the artworks of the Nazca people, created over 2,000 years ago, which some say were a form of communication with ancient aliens. Also, for the first time ever, we present art interpretations from our collective past with Stephen Hawk. And what they uncovered is he's actually holding a fish. So they believe him to be a fisherman, not an astronaut.
I think it's a space laser. Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk about UFOs and other weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy, what's my name, man? Jimmy Coe.
Yeah, and well, he's making a poke at me because I was just saying, what do I say when I come into this? You know, as you get a little older, you start kind of blanking out there. Anyway, what do we do on this podcast? That's right. We're going to talk about UFOs and other weird wonders of the world. Tonight, we are going to be dialing back the clock a bit. We're going to be looking at some possible ancient alien intervention on the Nazca Plains in Peru. But first, Jimmy, I think you have something very interesting.
Ooh,
interesting, I say, to share with the audience. What do you have there?
You know what? I think it's time for another contest. Yeah, I've been gathering together stuff. It's some of it's still rolling in from things I've ordered that I want to include in this winter giveaway. We had hoped to have it ready by Christmas, but there's just too much going on. So I figure we would do one that rolls out till the end of the year, and we'll start it at the release of this episode. Do you think that's a good idea? Yeah, just start it.
Yeah,
we'll
just start it up. When you hear this, go enter the contest. That's
right. Now, when should we end it? You're thinking the 31st? Let's just end it on the 31st, and then we'll announce the winner. So some of the things we have already. So from our friend Wendy Fadan, she's an artist.
She's also on the episode about mediums.
And she's an author and artist. And I'm holding this up for Steve to look at so he can help me describe it. As a matter of fact, I think he already received a couple of these himself. And we're going to be giving away these Bigfoot ornaments. They're stainless steel. They're solid. I mean, you could whack kids who are not listening with them. Of course, that's child abuse these days. In the 70s, that was called a Tuesday. And, you got these little stainless steel metal Bigfoot ornaments that are gorgeous, designed by an artist out of Ohio.
Oh, that's nice. I want that.
Yeah, you can't have it. It's for our listeners. It's a giveaway. If you want it, you got to go buy it yourself, my friend. So
An illustrated history of UFOs. It's a pretty thick-looking book there.
Yeah, it's nice. Look at this page, this introduction page. All these different little pictures of different UFOs.
We should have a copy of that as a reference material.
Maybe you'll get something for Christmas, my friend. Maybe.
And old Sandy might bring me something.
And his spaceship. So we also have this Bigfoot Popper, which I thought was really pretty cool.
I don't even know what that is.
Well, you place these little Nerf balls in Bigfoot's mouth, and then you push on him somewhere. I think in the back he's got this little launcher, and it launches this poof ball out of his face. It's a nice Bigfoot, and you'll be able to see all of these on our website. And here, I'm not going to unroll this, but here's a poster. It's rolled up. It's from the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in western West Virginia, and it gives all the reasons that you could have been committed to the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And let's see, I have a Cosmic Sponge mug coming as well, and I believe I have a Cosmic Sponge notebook coming. Both custom-made Cosmic Sponge products, which are going to be great. And who knows what other things might arrive between now and the release of this episode. So you'll have to go and check out our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. And on our homepage, you'll see our contest or entry form, as well as be able to see all the things that you too could win if you entered.
How many winners are we going to have?
I was thinking we would have one winner for the big prizes, and then maybe we'll have another two winners, the next two runner-ups. Okay. We'll give them some little prizes, because we have quite a bit.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Here.
Yeah, we had a pretty good turnout on the last one, so I think it'd be nice to have more than one winner.
I agree.
This episode should air, well, we ran a couple of days late last week. I apologize for that. That was all me on the editing front. But anyway, this podcast should go out on December 12th. on Sunday. We will end the contest on December 31st, will be the last day to enter. We will announce the winner January 9th. Enter now. Last day to enter, December 31st. Announce the winner on January 9th. So let's move on to the news stories. Flash. Washington, D.C.
You're such a nerd. We need to have that music, man. We need to do that. The beginning of our...
I always thought it was, back in the 40s, they'd always go, Flash.
Oh, did they?
You know. Oh, yeah.
I'm not as old as you.
Oh, come on, man. I don't know when they stopped saying that, but...
Flash.
Flash, Morgantown, West Virginia. Idiot locks himself in the bathroom for 4 hours.
Hey, that was just one time, man.
Right. Yeah, let's do some news. How about that?
I'm all up for it.
How many stories you got tonight? I've got more than
just
one story.
Just two. Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of news here. Let me go first.
Sure.
So I wanted to follow up on your news story from last week about the Pentagon and their criticism you said that has been mentioned of the assignment of the Airborne Object Identification Management Synchronization Group. This is the new program that is in the Pentagon to investigate UAPs, UFOs, in other words. So there's been a lot of concerns from Congress and the public. The Pentagon is pushing back on a series of criticisms by senior U.S. officials and analysts globally about a new office designed to study UFO sightings, saying accusations of a power grab and an attempt to run around congressional oversight amount to a misperception. The U.S. News last week documented the blowback to the Defense Department's new Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. An esoteric-sounding bureau announced quietly the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving. Many who have followed the issue closely called it an attempt to stifle essential civilian contributions to a complex and potentially dangerous subject. And senior members of Congress claimed it undermined proper oversight of a critical national security issue. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby defended the creation of office as necessary to provide uniformity to the reporting process and subsequent analysis. What they're saying here is there's been, first of all, the criticism from civilians such as Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. We all know who they are because Jimmy talks about them every week.
Have them on speed dial.
So anyway, they criticize it, saying that it doesn't have the resources to properly study this phenomenon, UFOs, UAPs. Some people in the Congress are criticizing, saying they're trying to do an end around where they don't have to necessarily have congressional oversight. The Pentagon's trying to say, you want all of these reports to go to all these different departments within the military and within Congress and everything. This is the way we have to do it.
Yeah, so I saw the briefing where the Pentagon official talked about it. And my understanding of it is that this won't be the only program that is established for the purposes of analyzing the data. It's just simply to compile the information into reports that are constructed from all the other people who are doing the analysis. They submit the reports to this one agency. That agency puts together the final reports that go out to everybody else. So they might be a filter, or they might be just something that organizes the data in a way that people are used to seeing in the government. I don't know.
So Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. I think the last part is what's important in their title. Management Synchronization Group, meaning we're going to put all this data together from different sources, and then we're going to send out one uniform report to everyone that should be getting this report. Because apparently the new laws passed require that. So another part of the criticism is, okay, so other groups are going to be investigating it, being in charge of investigating. Who are they? That hasn't apparently been announced yet. Or is it going to be announced? Is it going to be secret? And I think that's another criticism. You know, there'll still be the capacity to have a lot of secrecy around the subject. Well, let's not turn this into the synchronization group because it's too sensitive.
Why don't they call it just the synchronization group? That's way better than that other long name. That or call them something really cool like Men in Black or something like that. Something that doesn't have stigma to it.
That's the CIA's job.
Right.
Or whoever they are.
Whoever they are.
Majestic 12. Of course, some people think they're actually alien agents, so Could be.
Could be. Who knows? Well, that was a good follow-up.
I got another one.
Well, how many do you have? Do you have like a dozen or something? What's going on over there?
Well, no, I ran across another. By the way, that story comes from U.S. News.
What do you got, Cronkite?
Another quick follow-up from military.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the headline on military.com says, Pentagon UFO rapid response teams ordered up by Congress.
Whoa, ho, 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 ho.
Teams of Pentagon and intelligence community experts would rapidly respond to military UFO sightings and conduct field investigations under newly unveiled defense legislation set to pass Congress. Lawmakers also want scientific and technical experts to analyze data about the objects and what the military calls unidentified aerial phenomena, as well as any recovered materials or medical effects, according to the text of the annual Defense Authorization Bill released Tuesday. The bill requires all the findings to be collected under a new joint UAP office, delivered to Congress in annual reports and biannual briefings to defense committees, marking the most significant UFO legislation ever passed in the U.S., following the high-profile encounters with unknown objects reported by the Navy.
Wow. You know, when you said that, the very first image that popped in my mind is that beginning of that Godzilla movie where they got all the guys in the planes and they jump out of the planes with the parachutes and the goggles on and everything.
Yeah, I mean, when I first read the headline, plus it's on military.com, right? I'm thinking of SEAL Team 6 or something, but, you know, with Geiger counters or something, or some kind of alien detection device.
Yeah.
Then they got to have, you know, the nerdy scientist that's a civilian, you know, that telling them all about it while they're in the thing.
That's where he goes.
Yeah.
So I found this really cool story that comes with a video. Pilot captures footage of UFO fleet flying over the Pacific Ocean.
I saw that.
A video captured by a pilot flying over the Pacific Ocean is going viral on social media and sparking debates about the existence of extraterrestrial life. The clip was taken at 39,000 feet and starts with a view of the horizon and then the orange hue of the sun spread across the sky. And then as the pilot zooms in, around 12 illuminated dots can be seen flying in perfect order. And they look like they flicker and disappear and come back on, and then eventually they get to a certain point and then they flicker out and they're gone.
Oh, man, I can't wait to hear what the skeptics say about this video. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I looked at it and I immediately thought to myself, that's either a temperature inversion or a weather balloon.
Temperature inversions are a radar thing. It looks like they're dipping in and out of the clouds.
I can use those two things all the time. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I think it actually went in that cloud bank. That's what it looks like to me.
I agree. I mean,
that is pretty amazing. That's one of the best pieces of UFO footage I think I have ever seen.
It's pretty incredible at 39,000 feet. If you guys get a chance, go check it out. I thought maybe it could be reflections on the window of the plane, but it doesn't look that way.
Could be.
It could be an optical illusion.
I'm sure somebody's going to come up with something, but it still looks pretty amazing.
It does. Well, I got a great one here. Coming out of the online magazine, The National Interest, I was pleasantly surprised to find that the Pentagon has a plan for fighting an alien invasion, and it involves Russia. Now, Russia itself doesn't have a plan, apparently.
So they say.
But the Pentagon is looking to Russia to help us out in the case of an alien invasion. A team of scientists from America's NASA Planetary Science Division disagreed. While humanity has not yet observed any extraterrestrial intelligence, contact with ETI remains possible. And this is being Russia saying, there's no chance for, extraterrestrials, or not likely. The scientists conceded that while the extraterrestrials could be friendly or ambivalent, we can't be sure. And so they put a plan in place, a plan that involves Russia coming to help us out. Now, the article goes back and forth and talks about, what the interstellar war plan looks like. And
what does it look like?
They don't tell you because it's secret. It's a secret war plan. They're not going to let the aliens know what the plan is beforehand, but they did get around to finally contacting Jeff Goldblum, who said, as long as you have an Apple laptop, it's going to be fine. Just give me an Apple laptop in about 6 hours.
Yeah, and Will Smith's got to fly him up there.
Yeah, a decent pilot. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's all good. So, just rest easy tonight, folks, because we do have a plan for the alien interstellar invasion.
You know, I could be wrong here, but it seems during the Reagan administration, I remember Reagan made a speech where he said, I often wonder. Of course, Reagan came from Hollywood. He probably played in some alien invasion movies or certainly around some of that kind of stuff. So maybe that sort of thing was a little more natural for him to think about, being an actor. I remember him making a speech about, I often wonder how our differences would disappear, and I'm paraphrasing here, if there was suddenly an alien invasion. And I ask you, are the aliens not already here, or something like that, right?
Yep.
And I'm not 100% sure, but I think there was some kind of agreement made between the Soviets and the United States back then that if we were invaded, that they would come together. I know I've heard that. I can't tell you the details about it, and I mean, now they're Russia, so a lot of the agreements we had with the Soviets no longer apply.
Yeah, well, it says here, in an odd episode in 2013, a Russian space official admitted, unprovoked, that Moscow has no strategy for combating an invasion by galactic marauders. Just because one government official says we have no plans doesn't mean the military doesn't have some kind of plan. It may be secret. I don't know. Is there a space program funded and headed by the military, or is it a civilian? I would say it's probably military. So he's part of the military. He was on the staff of the Titov Base Control Center near Moscow. But not everyone in the military is privy to all the secrets and all the plans. That way, if they're captured by the aliens, they can, under torture or some type of mind control device or something, they can't tell the plan, right? We don't know who this Jeff Goldblum is, alien man. All right. You got anything else? Nope, that's my stories for tonight. All right, so be sure and check out our Facebook page. Just look for Cosmic Sponge. Also join our Facebook group, Cosmic Sponge Theorist, and you can read all these stories and more. So before we get started on tonight's main topic, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. If you like the show and want it to continue, please consider donating to the show by clicking on the little coffee cup icon on our webpage called Buy Me a Coffee. Our webpage address is cosmicsponge.com. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. And don't forget to also check out Instagram. All right, so what we're going to be talking about tonight is the Nazca Plain, or the Nazca Lines. These are a series of geoglyphs that have been there for hundreds of years, up to 1,000 years, but no one recognized what they were until the advent of aircraft of modern times in the 20th century, when people started flying over the plain, which they knew existed. Even the Spanish wrote about these lines in the Peruvian desert in the 1500s. But no one knew they made these geoglyphic shapes that can only be seen from the air. So the question remains to science and to everyone else, who made these? Why did they make these geoglyphs, these gigantic geoglyphs that make pictures of animals and beings that you can't quite recognize? What was their purpose? What does modern science tell us about it? So Jimmy, I know you've done some legwork on this subject. Why don't you give us a rundown of the Nazca Lines? Approximately 250 miles south of Lima, Peru, not far from the shores of the Pacific Ocean, there is a great arid plain known as the Pampa Colorada, or Collard Plain, also known as the Red Plain. It's located northwest of the city of Nazca in southern Peru. Etched across the landscape here are geoglyphs and bioglyphs, some of which run as long as 30 miles and as wide as 9 miles. Since their rediscovery in the 1920s, the lines have been variously interpreted, but they still remain largely a mystery. The American historian Paul Kossak first observed the plains sometime in the early 1940s and thought initially they may have been used for astronomical purposes. Maria Reike, a German translator who spent years studying under Paul Kossak and then continued studying until the end of her life, lobbied for the preservation of these large lines in the sands. Many people have postulated what these lines might be, running from an astronomical calendar, an irrigation structure, or perhaps even something dealing with alien visitation. Tonight we're going to get into it and try to figure out exactly what these lines are all about.
I went to a website called Nazca Lines Tour, where you can actually book a tour of this. They'll fly you over and you can see it. So these are some of the theories, just very brief descriptions of the different theories that have been put forth. And this is their description of the site. The Nazca Lines are a series of geometric shapes and zoomorphic figures etched into the sand of the Nazca Desert south of Lima. The most famous drawings include a hummingbird, a monkey, a condor, a spider, and a parrot. In total, there are 70 plant and animal figures plus over 800 straight lines and 300 geometric designs. It wasn't until the advent of modern aviation in the 1930s that the figures were identified, since it's impossible to see them at ground level. Dozens more were discovered in subsequent decades and, in fact, are still being discovered today. Since few other traces remain of the culture who produced these massive designs, the exact purpose and origin has been hotly debated by researchers, and a number of Nazca line theories have been proposed. So here's some of the theories. One is ancient astronauts. Now, this one is by far the most famous one. The idea of ancient astronauts, probably not the first, but the most famous one in modern times, was Erich von Däniken. He's a Swiss writer, and in 1968, he published a book called Chariots of the Gods. In that book, he describes everything from ancient Egypt, ancient Babylon, to Aztec calendar, and points to all these things that are advanced ancient cultures that seem way too advanced for their time, and brought this idea of ancient astronauts, that our ancient cultures were visited by extraterrestrials. Now, I'm not sure about the book. I read it was many, many years ago. My mom actually bought that book, even though she really wasn't into UFOs and stuff. I have no idea why she did, but anyway, I guess because it was a popular book at the time. I read it years and years ago, but it's been many years. But I have watched the documentary several times. It was made, I believe, around 1970, 71. And I watched it. It's on Amazon right now, Amazon Prime, if you get that. So I watched the end of it because they saved the Nazca Lines for the very last part of the documentary. And I watched that right before we got on here. I tell you, man, the way they lay it out, the way you look at it, I mean, these sites can only be seen from the air. You can only truly make out what these forms of from the air. There's not a mountain nearby that you can climb and look down and see these things. The only way you could tell what these geoglyphs are is from the air. The idea of ancient astronauts is that this tribe, the ancient Nazcan culture, created these so that aliens could see it from space. And then there's also parts of the Nazca Plain that look like landing strips. I mean, they really do. In that documentary, they take, they're in a Cessna Skymaster airplane, and they just come in close to it as if they're coming in for a landing. I mean, it looks like a landing strip. If you saw it from the air and you didn't know anything about Nazca Plain, you'd think, hey, right there's a landing strip in the desert. I mean, it's what it looks like. It's straight, it's flat, it's right on the top of a mountain. There's more than one place that looks that way.
I have a question real quick here. So alien spacecraft require a landing strip rather than just come straight down on the ground. I mean, when you see all
I don't know.
Flying saucers, just come straight down.
Well, we don't know what the ancient astronauts were in.
Oh, you're saying that maybe they had a learning curve and their original flying saucers were drifting saucers.
Maybe been a whole different group. You don't know.
Oh, it's like a tour
there
group.
are billions of planets in the Milky Way, billions and billions of galaxies outside of our galaxy. So who's to say there was only one group of extraterrestrials that's ever been on Earth?
Okay, sure. Landing strip in Peru. I don't know that would be the first place I'd pick to land in 1 AD, but...
Well, let's think about this. All right, just a little bit of speculation here. But let's say you were from an alien planet. Let's say you're from Earth and you're going to go visit another planet.
Okay, sure.
Well, first of all, just to say a landing strip, would they need that? I kind of agree because, how would you know how dense the atmosphere was? Things like that. Like aircraft are designed for the density of our atmosphere. Mm-hmm. The means of propulsion, everything's based on it functioning in our atmosphere. For aliens to need some type of landing strip, to me, also seems a little questionable. But then what if they got here by whatever means, but they don't travel around in their spaceship, but they build aircraft to travel around in? Once they're here, if they're here for like an expedition for 10 years or something, what's to say they won't build some aircraft that need some type of landing strip?
That's ridiculous.
Why?
It's just ridiculous.
Why would that be ridiculous? I mean, if you have a big, I don't know what is required to move this big spaceship, but maybe it's some kind of big mothership. That's your main base. But if you want to send out scouting missions, you need some other type of craft to do it.
Yeah, okay.
They're like, okay,
I'm going to build a craft from the 1900s.
No,
from my spaceship.
You don't think so? You're saying that fixed wing aircraft and will go away at some point, and we'll just have like anti-gravity devices or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, all right. Anyway, I don't know. just throwing that out there.
You know what my theory is? Maybe. I always thought this when I first heard about the Nazca Lines. I always thought that, well, maybe they had like some kind of genius, like Leonardo di Nazca, and he went around and he developed like a glider, and they took off in gliders and they did these little things. Or maybe they had balloons. Maybe they figured out some kind of hot air balloon technology.
Well, there's some theories around that. So anyway, there's the ancient astronaut thing.
Okay,
and
sure.
that is the theory that really made these Nazca Lines popular, and a lot of these geoglyphs that not only do you see here, this is definitely the most you'll find anywhere on the planet. But they're all over, really. They're all over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big horse one in England, but I think some of them, though, you can see from mountaintops and things, though. Where these, you really can't. Your hot air balloon theory, Jim Woodman in the 1970s, he concluded that the only way Nazca people could have constructed these lines in the sand would have been to achieve flight. This presumption was not based on any particular evidence, though he did claim to have found a pottery fragment depicting a hot air balloon, a claim that most people consider spurious. He eventually built a hot air balloon using local materials in order to test his theory. After several failed attempts, the balloon was finally able to take flight, though only for a few minutes. Mary Reich, the one you were talking about earlier, she'd researched these for years and years. I remember after the documentary Chariot of the Gods came out, there was another like counter documentary that came out, kind of poo-pooed the whole ancient astronaut because they took every little thing and said, look, this is really what science says about this. And she was in it. And in fact, one of the lines that he showed in his book, now it doesn't show it in the documentary, but in his book, he shows a line that he says it looks like modern airport. It implies that was taken from the air, and then they show her feet walking on it, that it was actually like a really small line on the ground, But I'm sure it was just a mistake of his when he's looking at a lot of different photographs. So,
well, you could do.
I mean, there's plenty of other things there. He could have left that one out, but I'm sure it was just a mistake on his part. But anyway, she believed that the site held special astronomical significance with the sun's positioning in relation to designs acting as a giant solar calendar. This allowed people of Nazca culture to observe solstices and equinoxes, as well as predict things like solar eclipses. Reich was a steadfast critic of von Dankian theory and worked to debunk it by emphasizing the connection between geoglyph designs and other elements of the Nazca culture, such as pottery. Attempts to verify her own theory have been inconclusive, but it nevertheless remains an influential one.
I had heard that theory that they believe they relate to the astronomical constellations, but a lot of astronomers have come forward and said, no, they don't. Very few of them, if any of them. Now, one astronomer, Phyllis Petluga, an astronomer at the Adler Planetarium located in Chicago, Illinois in the USA, is famous for her studies on the Nazca Lines. These lines drawn in the Nazca Desert in Peru were between 500 BC to 580, about a 1,000-year period, roughly. One of the early researchers, and probably the most prominent researcher, was a woman named Rika. Phyllis was inspired by Rika and looked into her astronomical calendar theory. And when she did that, she came away with a slightly different look at how she was interpreting the data. And it's not necessarily that the lines were mimicking constellations, but rather that the lines were mimicking counter constellations, or the space between the stars. So those dead spaces in the sky. Now, this is something I thought a lot about in terms of the differences between people, particularly in the United States. On the East Coast is even more prominent, and I'm sure pretty much throughout most of the United States and most of the developed world. When we look up at the night sky, we don't see a lot. A lot of it's because of light pollution. And these ancient peoples, when they would look up at the sky, they would see this canvas of just the entire Milky Way. It would be something that would be really prominent in the sky, and every little thing would be tracked and seen and revered. So those dark places in the sky probably weren't littered all over the place. There were probably fewer of them than I would have imagined, because I think, well, maybe there weren't that many stars in the sky, because when I look up, there's a lot of black up there. But when these people were looking up, it was filled with stars, nebula, and everything in between. She might have a point there. I haven't looked into it a whole lot, but I did find that an interesting theory.
I find that fascinating as well, that it could be their interpretation of constellations, although no one's been able to say, hey, look at part of Orion and look at this star group over here, and that makes the Hummingbird. No one's been able to really pinpoint how that would work out, but who knows what was in their minds, right? It's a 200 square mile stretch of desert, by the way, where all of this exists. In the documentary, where you see the Nazca Plain, there is a site called Pisco Bay. In the documentary, they say that it's 2,000 years old. Well, I knew the Nazca Lines weren't that old. And that's some of my problems with the whole ancient astronaut theories anyway, is they want to look at Egypt's pyramids and then look at South America's pyramids and draw these correlations, even though they don't really resemble each other than their pyramids. But also, geologically in time, they're really far apart. I mean, the pyramids in Egypt probably existed 3,000 years before the ones were built in South America. So it's not like there was these, parallel cultures going on and aliens traveling around the world at the same time. I just think it's a real common structure. But anyway, it turns out that, they have found on this site, it looks like a trident pointing toward as you come off the ocean. The desert starts right off the Pacific Ocean. And on this large hill, there looks to be a trident, or maybe it's a cactus or something, but it looks like a giant trident pointing towards the Nazca Plain. And in the documentary, they say it's 2,000 years old. And it turns out that radiocarbon dating of some of the pottery around there, that it was, they believe that this place, the culture existed around 200 BCE. So it would make it over 2,000 years old if they're the ones that drew this particular geoglyph. Now, some of the humanoid-looking figures don't resemble people at all. And that's another thing that ancient astronaut theorists look at. There's one that they actually nicknamed the astronaut.
Okay, well, okay. We've all seen some drawings that some of the kids in kindergarten made that were supposed to be of people. I'm just saying, some of them look like crabs, and some of them look like robots. So there's artistic license here, and there's also a lack of skill that might be involved. Who knows? Plus, I mean,
well, don't you think, though, that some of the other ones look, for instance, the animal, the spider, the hummingbird, some of the other ones look great. You can clearly see what they are.
Yeah, but there might have been artistic license going on. There might be some self-loathing going on from the artist. I mean, I just want to throw that out there. Plus, this is really interesting. They uncovered some additional lines attributed to the astronaut figure. And what they uncovered is he's actually holding a fish. So they believe him to be a fisherman, not an astronaut.
I think it's a space laser.
It's
a ray gun. It's not no fish.
My name is Zorg. We make all of our lasers in the shape of fish.
You don't know what the aliens are going to shape their lasers out of.
We worship fish. We make all of our laser guns fish.
So you're saying he needs to be called the fisherman, not the astronaut?
I'm okay with still calling him the astronaut if you want to. Just realize that it's not really what he is. I mean, he's a fisherman.
And they keep discovering a lot of these, a lot more of these, even much more recently, using drones and other types of technology. In 2016, there was a Japanese team that found a 98-foot-long mythical creature with many legs and its tongue sticking out.
Yeah, there's been a lot of new discoveries. Scientists from Japan, using machine learning, have for the first time been able to identify new figures amongst the motifs of the Peru's Nazca Lines. They've uncovered like 143 new ones, including this.
That's just in recent years, yeah.
Yeah, including this really cool looking one that looks like something I've seen in cartoons or something. He has 3 eyes. It looks like 3 eyes, or maybe 2 eyes, and the eye in the middle is supposed to be his nose. He's got like a rectangular head, And he's got these three, like you see on a rooster, these three tufts of hair, and he's holding a cane up like he's like getting ready to beat somebody with it. It's a pretty good looking figurine. Now, one of the things I didn't know before we started researching this was that I imagined all of the Nazca lines to be on a flat plain, and that's not the case. Some of these are on the foothills that surround the plain, and you could see those from the ground, some of those. And recent survey of the land, they were able to identify the foundations of structures, pointing to a more sophisticated society than what they first had thought. And some of the structures may have even been tall enough for the geoglyphs to be viewed from the top of buildings. That's speculation, though, because I don't know how they would know how tall the buildings are.
So here's another interesting find.
Oh.
Now, this is in an article talking about where they've discovered a lot of the new shapes like you were talking about and that Japanese team. They said one discovery they've made is, they said on all these lines, now most of the Nazca lines are just geometric shapes and lines and things lines going out in different directions. There are some 70 depictions of plants and animals. Research have discovered that some of Peru's massive creations were identified incorrectly, and that the figures are actually birds who lived far away from the sites of the geoglyphs. This clearly raises many new questions. Among the 16 massive bird carvings in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru are a hermit, and that's the hummingbird. Yeah. They say that's a forest species, not a desert species. There's a pelican, which is a coastal bird, and this is according to research published in June 2019 of the Journal of Archaeological Science. And they said their findings indicate that the geoglyphs represent exotic species of birds found a far distance from where lines were created. And this is a quote, "We revealed several discrepancies between their geolithic characteristics and those of taxonomic groups to which they were attributed by previous research. In addition, we determined that some of the geoglyphs depicted a number of specific birds, including hermit, pelicans, and what is most likely an immature parrot. Each of these birds is regionally exotic. For instance, the hermits and parrots are only found in tropical rainforests, whereas pelicans live in coastal areas." I mean, it's just another mystery. They're not even representations of species of animals that are near where these are created. They're jungle species or coastal species of birds.
Yeah, so that would probably indicate at least a trading society, which I think they thought the Nazca were. And even thinking that the oldest lines found on the foothills belonged to a previous civilization that preceded the Nazca by several hundred years, if not several thousand years. What did they call them? They called them the Paracos, so that these may have spanned several different civilizations. And the big difference between the two would be that the Paracos culture's depictions were largely of human figures intended to be viewed by other people, hence being on the foothills, I imagine. And then the Nazca iconography was, in many cases, something that you'd have to view from the sky. Now, they weren't sure how they made such accurate depictions on the ground until they discovered that there were these holes in the ground, and in a couple of cases, there was still the remnants of some posts as some sticks. And what they believe they did is they mapped it out on a small canvas, either leatherworking or whatever they may have used at that point, and did it in a grid pattern, and then used string and line, string between two posts, and they found these holes that indicated that's where they put the post in order to do the lines, mark out where their lines would go, particularly the straight lines. So they're fairly certain that's how they constructed the lines for those larger, only viewed by air.
The straight lines.
The straight lines. And the curved lines would have been a bit more complicated, for sure.
It's been demonstrated how ancient cultures could use three posts to make sure you're traveling straight, right? I mean, that way you can tell if one's off. If you close one eye and squint at it, you can look down the three or four posts and tell if any of them are askew. And obviously if they're pointing towards some astronomical marker, a star, or the point of the summer solstice, or one of the equinoxes or something, I mean, obviously you could point toward that. And there's no doubt these could have been created drawings right? We have the dimensions of drawings, and then you have one guy make the design in a small way and say, okay, now we're going to make it gigantic, where only the gods can see it, right? Or something like that. And nobody knows why they did it, of course. No one will ever know. We can only speculate about it. One fascinating subject that's brought up in the very first part of the Chariots of the Gods movie is the idea that these Neolithic islanders in the South Pacific who were primitive Stone Age technology, unaware of the outside world, that during World War II, when the Japanese and the Americans started occupying these islands to use as air bases and naval spots and things like that, that these islanders, were very, very primitive. And then here comes this far advanced civilization creating these runways. And of course, I'm sure they traded with the natives or gave them food, clothes, all this kind of stuff. It was discovered later, after the Americans departed, the war's over, and then anthropologists went to look at some of these civilizations or some of these tribes on some of these primitive islands, that they were imitating the soldiers that were there before. And they were doing things like building bamboo fetishes of airplanes and creating runways. Like they'd clear out the jungle and create a runway. And they created these whole ceremonies around trying to get the people to come back. And I saw this in the documentary. And in the documentary, it is most obviously a put on, right? I mean, you can tell it's made for the film. But it does represent something true because I looked it up. It's actually called a cargo cult. And this has been seen all over the world. It said particularly in an area in Melanesia, in the wake of contact with Allied military forces during the Second World War. Isolated and pre-industrial island cultures that were lacking technology found soldiers and supplies arriving in large numbers, often by airdrop. The soldiers would trade with the islanders. After the war, soldiers departed. Cargo cults arose, attempting to imitate the behaviors of the soldiers, thinking that this would cause the soldiers and their cargo to return. Some cult behaviors involved mimicking the day-to-day activities and dress styles of soldiers, such as performing parade ground drills with wooden or salvaged rifles. They included a myth dream that is the synthesis of indigenous and foreign elements, the expectation of help from the ancestors, charismatic leaders, and lastly, belief in the appearance of an abundance of goods. There's other examples of this, of where more modern peoples have mixed with these pre-industrial societies. And then after the Western society left, they wanted that to come back, that cargo. You saw it in Papua New Guinea as well. They're making these airstrips and they're doing these rituals and doing these things to try and get to bring the cargo back, right? That's why they call it. And they also notice crosses because that's such, the Christianity and the cross is a big symbol. So they started seeing crosses appear in their rituals as well. So I found that fascinating that I never knew anything about it until I heard about it in that documentary. And I've heard about it before, but I'd never read it or researched it until we started looking into this subject.
So you think maybe the aliens carry around fish guns, have big heads, or maybe have rooster heads?
I see the logic of this. These things can only be seen from the air. I mean, I know there's a few hills and you can see some of the glyphs, but most of the big ones and most of the animals, you can't. There's things on top of mountaintops and things that can only really be appreciated from the air.
I got you.
You can't make out anything about it. The idea here is maybe these aliens were here for some purpose, the same as we were, some unknowable purpose, right? I mean, these pre-industrial people had no idea why these Americans or Japanese soldiers showed up on their island, started building stuff, had all kinds of food, clothing, things, it would have looked like alien technology to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can imagine how advanced that is to a pre-industrial society. They barely comprehend probably what they're seeing. And then suddenly they just leave for no reason. These islanders started building airfields and things like that and mock airplanes to try and attract them to come back, to bring that abundance of goods. So anyway, it's a fascinating idea, and it's shown that it can happen here in other cases. Who's to say that it didn't happen a couple of thousand years ago and didn't just become part of their rituals to make these giant glyphs that can only be seen from the sky for the sky people?
Well, yeah, I think if they had, if they unearthed a glyph that had that looked like a flying saucer, or it looked like the Zamora egg, or something like that, I'd be more inclined to lean into it a bit more. I mean, you're right. That's a pretty fascinating aspect of human cultures, that they'll do mimicry in order to try to lure back whatever this advanced civilization is, because it provided benefit to them. But I don't know.
It's a stretch.
I think it's a stretch.
But it's fascinating. And the lines on the Nazca Plain are fascinating regardless of where they come from. It's a huge mystery, and they're still discovering things all the time. And some of them are weird-looking animals and weird-looking shapes. The predominant ones are, the monkey and the birds and the spider, the ones we're all very familiar with. Mm-hmm. But they're discovering some newer ones all the time, using all this technology. So.
You know what it is? It's that they went and they sent the good artist out and did the original work. And then, they have one guy, let's call him Gunther. And it's like, man, Gunther, he messed up the picture of the fisherman. Gunther. He messed up the picture of the fisherman, man. He's hitting the pipe pretty hard this week. And he went up there. But the fish looks really good. Well, that wasn't Gunther. That was Joe. Joe's really good at fish.
I wanted to clear up a rumor that was around the Nazca Plains in that region. There was a mummy found.
Was the kid with her?
Huh?
Was the kid with her? It was.
That was bad. I'm going to edit that. Good God.
It would have been better if you caught it.
Well, I mean, it took a second. It was so bad, it took me a second to get it. I mean, I love corny jokes, but that wasn't even.
You'll forget it in 20 minutes anyway.
There were some mummies found in the region. And they look really strange. They look like aliens, and they look like they have 3 toes and three fingers, right?
Ooh.
At first, people were saying, hey, these may be extraterrestrials that were buried here. But it turns out they ran some DNA tests, and they are 100% human DNA.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah.
What were they doing there?
In case someone out there in the listening world had heard they had unearthed some alien bodies, turns out they were 100% human. They just were deformed.
Okay.
So, sorry about that.
So it's sort of like a Hills Has Eyes cemetery, where you just got a bunch of, chalk eaters buried out in the desert.
So this is again, a very fascinating subject, whether you believe in ancient aliens or just the fact that these ancient peoples created these and that they've persisted just this very arid, stable environment that these things have lasted as long as they have. And I always wonder, too, it's sort of like ancient Egypt, those pyramids and a lot of their structures and everything survived because it's an arid desert, same as these Nazca line drawings. I mean, I wonder in other regions, other places in the world where we have more environmental factors like forests and
how much we've
things.
lost.
Of course, how much has been lost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we see a lot of that. They discover new pyramids and new Aztec and Mayan stuff all the time. They just don't have the money to excavate it all. I mean, there's tons of stuff down there. It was a huge civilization. Both of them were.
Yeah. I was, with the Nazca lines, I was looking at some of the more recent satellite imagery that had come out. And one of the things that I found just compelling was a researcher, Rosa Las Piranha. Not piranha, piranha. I guess it is like a piranha. Las Piranha of the National Research Council in Rome tells Vice that satellite images of the site link the unusual designs created between 500 BC and 500 AD to a series of spiral-shaped holes nearby called puquinos. The holes, she said, were used for irrigation and fed into an intricate underground aqueduct system that allowed the Nazca to transform the desert into a garden. And if you look at these things, they are pretty cool looking. It's spiral stone walls going further and further down into the ground, and then there's an aquifer or something under there that's maintained by the water that's collected from the surface, maybe, or distributed to the surface. I'm not sure. I do know that it only rains about 20 minutes out of the year in that desert. 20 minutes of rain.
It is so arid. It is the most arid desert on Earth, except maybe Antarctica. And the only reason it's so arid is it's so cold. But this desert is so arid that they have collectors to collect the moisture when the fog rises off of the Pacific Ocean and drifts over the land. Mm-hmm. They actually have collectors to collect the moisture from the fog, the morning fog that drifts over the land. It is very, very dry. Yeah, David Johnson, an independent researcher, also believes that they were markers for subterranean aquifers, but they say his theories conflict with the prevailing understanding of Andean agricultural methods. So anyway, we don't know. No one will ever really know. Maybe there'll be more discoveries. Maybe we've discovered new things here. A lot of people think they were sacred pathways, had to do with their worship, whatever their religion was.
Did you hear the one where they thought they were utilized for textiles? The creation of textiles?
No, that is not on my list.
Yeah, so this came out of a archaeologist from Egypt, where they had seen these large geoglyphs utilized for textiles. And I'm not sure how you would utilize a geoglyph for a textile, but maybe for making some of as a loom for creating, I don't know, 9-mile wide pictures of spiders. I don't know. But I did see that was one that was on the list of more accepted than aliens.
Well, they're all more accepted than aliens.
Well, I don't know. I think I would accept aliens more than a large textile thing, because we don't have any rugs that are 9 miles wide of giant spiders or hummingbirds.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Right. Fascinating subject. I don't know how much more I can add to this. Jimmy, do you have anything else on this subject you need to let the listeners know about the Nazca Lines?
I was really hoping that there would be aliens involved here, but I'm just not seeing it. The more I got into it, the more I research it, the more it seems like it's just probably some sort of irrigation system.
Well, I think you can explain anything away, but why would your irrigation system need to be in the shape of a giant hummingbird of a species that doesn't even exist in your region, but exists miles and miles away in the jungle?
Well, I think I accept the explanation that the archaeologists give, that it was probably a religious appeal to deities, and they're picking up things from areas that have the things they don't have, such as lush green forest, viable plant life, and lots of rainfall. Yeah,
I could see that. They're saying, hey, if we make these glyphs, maybe the gods will say, hey, bring us these birds along with the jungles and the water.
Exactly.
Who knows? So that's pretty neat. But, who knows? Maybe alien landing site. Our cargo cult, as we've seen exist in our own earthbound cultures.
I think that's the coolest part of this whole exploration into the lines.
Yeah, check out that cargo. I may even post an article about cargo cults. At least read the Wikipedia article about it. It's fascinating. I find that incredibly fascinating.
What would be really interesting is if we can find other civilizations or other cultures around the globe that are using mimicry for things that are far more advanced than other things that were occurring around the world at that time. You know what I mean?
Well, that is the whole idea of ancient aliens, and some of the beliefs, some of the things you see, some of the relics you see. That's the whole purpose of saying, look, this cargo cult exists. We know exists. This is a known phenomenon. Could this have happened thousands of years ago when there was extraterrestrials visiting in our planet who were probably viewed as gods? I mean, these pre-industrials probably looked at the American soldiers and the Japanese as being some type of god or something coming out of the sky on airplanes. And I mean, think about it. It's possible.
Sure. I'm with you.
So I think we're going to wrap things up right here. But before we go, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. Visit our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. There you can support the show by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee icon, or you can visit our web store. But most importantly, right now, this week, you can enter our contest.
The contest will start on December 12th and run to December 31st. You can enter by going to www.cosmicsponge.com, and you can enter in multiple ways, meaning you can enter more than once. You can enter by following us on Instagram, giving us a like on Facebook, subscribing to us on YouTube, or subscribing to the podcast. Each one of those will net you an additional entry into the contest. The contest is limited to people who are over the age of 18 in the continental U.S. Sorry to all of our international listeners. We're working on a new system so that in the future we'll be able to open it up to you guys as well. And I think that's wraps it up pretty nicely.
Now, will those likes and subscribing on YouTube and stuff, will that automatically enter that person into the contest?
Automatically enters them into the contest.
All right. So, and one little caveat, anyone that is a member of our immediate family, you are not eligible to enter the contest. So, sorry, Darla.
And sorry, Brian. I know you really love that Bigfoot stuff.
And sorry, Mom. Actually, she doesn't listen to the podcast. She asks me about it all the time. She's like, well, what is it? It's a podcast, Mom. Well, what is that? I'm like, it's like radio
for the internet.
Yeah.
You're right. So. Yeah, well.
Actually, my sister played some of it for once. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she was into it. I mean, she did buy Chariots of the Gods, so maybe she's a
closet alien.
Closet believer.
Yeah.
You know.
She could be. She could have been abducted. She might have been a contactee.
That would explain a lot.
That would explain a lot. You're an alien hybrid, Steve.
All right. So also check us out on Instagram and Facebook. A lot of the news stories you heard on tonight's show, you can find there. So with all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. Catch you next week.
It's ancient aliens, man. Ancient aliens.
I don't know. I wasn't so sure until you told me about that. What did you call it? Cargo pant?
Cargo cults.
They get their cargo pants and they get out there and
they have them dress up like Betty Grable and all kinds of stuff. All right, man. We'll see you later.
That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.